Okay. Hello, everybody. Christian Puente here, aka PixelBrave. Welcome to That Nerdy Site's pilot episode of That Anime Pod. It's the bi-monthly? I'm learning how calendars work. Basically twice a month, every other week, I'll be dropping an episode of That Anime Pod, and it's going to be a seasonal anime recap show. So every season, I'll pick up to 3 anime to recap, and along with that, I'll also be hitting some fun, different topics every week. And so this is just kind of the pilot, get you guys introduced with the format, and that way you know what to expect, and also that way I can hopefully get y'all involved as well. I'd definitely love to include comments, questions, and definitely even interviews that I'll be inserting into the episodes in future episodes, of course. Yeah, so I hope you guys enjoy this pilot. Because it's a pilot, it's gonna be a bit quicker, but I hope to have much more meatier conversations with guests over some of our favorite anime topics. That Anime Pod is part of That Nerdy Site, made with a lot of friends from the Kind of Funny community. Yeah, I'm really thankful. Just to give more context to this, I've always wanted to do an anime podcast, and I just am not very familiar with the back end of how to get podcasts approved and feeds ready and all that jazz, and I don't even know all the red tape that goes behind it. But with That Nerdy Site, they've just let me, okay, do your thing, just hit record, edit it up however you want, give us the file, and we'll take care of it from there, which sounds perfect to me. So again, I'm very happy and very grateful to have this opportunity, and I hope you guys will be along for the ride and enjoy these you got right in. Let me know, what is the right term? Is it bi-weekly, bi-monthly? If I'm we're going to get an episode every other week, and let me know how that's called. So to jump into things, yeah, I've got 3 anime ready. We're at the end of the fall season for 2019. So the way anime seasons work is you start at the beginning of the year in winter, spring, summer, fall. So yeah, so the last anime of this year, 2019, we're in the fall season. And so if this podcast had already been starting up, then what I would have been recapping are Food Wars, the 4th season, Ascendance of a Bookworm, which is its 1st season, and then the 4th season of My Hero Academia, which I'm sure a lot of y'all are already very familiar with. Just to start recapping right away, Food Wars just had its finale, which was the episode after the last Shokugeki. If you'd asked me if I think Food Wars was going to have one of the most epic, one of the most fulfilling and satisfying endings of an anime, I'm not sure I would have believed you, which technically the anime is not ended. The manga is still ongoing, and so I do think there's going to be another season of the anime. But me personally, I think this is where I jump off the train, so to speak. What I've heard is that the manga continues, but that the story isn't as strong. And this has honestly been like such a high point ending. This has been the end game of endings for seasons. And so I think people could probably understand that feeling. For example, when Endgame ended, a lot of people, I think, including myself, are like, I could use a little break from Marvel movies because that was such a good closure. That was such a good note to end on. And I could say the same thing for Food Wars. Food Wars, I definitely have my problems with because of all the fan service. And it is, I admit, a little formulaic, but I was completely caught off guard by these last 2 episodes in the finale, seeing how it actually ended. And I guess we can go into little spoilers, okay? I'm going to say ahead of time that any anime I'm talking about here is going to be spoilers. So, Food Wars, Ascendance of a Bookworm, and My Hero Academia Season 4. Spoilers for all 3 of those right now, okay? To find out that the season of Food Wars would end with Erina really having to battle Yukihira, you always knew this battle was going to happen. But what caught me by surprise with this is that in order to win as a team, they had to beat each other. And what I enjoy so much about that episode was that you see how she's incorporating not only the methods of cooking that she's learned from the different Polar Star students, but she's also embraced the spirit of having fun when you're cooking. And that is what, that ends up being what won them the final Food War, the final Shokugeki. As for how things followed up afterwards, that's what this whole last episode was just recapping. Okay, so the last Shokugekis happened, the rebels have won, peace to the galaxy, so to speak. For my second show that I'm recapping, I'm talking about Ascendance of a Bookworm, which is an isekai, and again, who I'll try to give context for just in case people are new to anime or new to this show or just tuning in for curiosity. An isekai is a genre of anime, and it's basically a fish out of water, but usually it involves a character dying and being reincarnated in a parallel world that is usually kind of Middle Ages kind of vibe, like think your Game of Thrones and things like that. Usually, a character is revived and starting their life anew, but with their memories of Japan and their memories of being in this current, in our world, but now they're in a fantasy world usually. But this is a little different. It's instead of being about someone reincarnated to becoming a hero, they're just born into a life of poverty. Not poverty, but like, a lower income family. And the whole premise of the series is that in her previous life, she was a bookworm. She was just like constantly reading and obsessed with the books. And that has still carried over. But the thing about being reborn into kind of a lower income family is not having access to books. In this world that she's been born into, Mine is the name of the main character, by the way. Mine being born into this new world where only the noblest of people, only the richest have access to paper, let alone books. And it's kind of like this quest to DIY a book. If you can imagine being thrown all the way back to, the time of kings and queens, castles, dragons, all that kind of thing. Not that there's a lot of magic in this. There's sprinkles of magic in this show, but what I really enjoy more than anything is just like the wholesomeness of just this character having this love for books and using as much of their knowledge as they can to get that, to finally get their own book, whether that's making their own paper and ink or making their own clay tablets and just using the tools available to try to make up, paper and books. And I thought maybe it was going to be a one-off, but at the finale this week, it was revealed that this is only the ending of part 1. So I don't know how many parts there are going to be, but the Ascendance of Bookworm basically ended with Mine making a really big step forward. She got a job at the cathedral working with the high priest, which is going to allow her to read holy scriptures and scrolls. I mean, one of the biggest abundance of books in this new world is through the church. And Mine is kind of learned, through this world how to negotiate, learning what people in this world want and learning how to, under the tutelage of this kind of merchant, learn how to negotiate to get what she wants. And you find out that Mine has been, we've known along that Mine has been sick, but we find out that she's sick because she has a high abundance of magic, and that's why the church takes such an interest in her. But it's cool to see where this all led up to. Mine has been learning to negotiate, and then now that she finally learns that her sickness is from this magic ability the church wants, she's negotiated and finally gotten a lot of things that her and her family wanted, which is, for her to have a bit more access to healthcare. And so it was cool to finally see that after so many trials and tribulations, Mine has finally been accepted into a position and negotiated her way into a part of the society where she can finally be around books and writing and reading and just can finally enjoy that pastime. And so it's a very wholesome anime. I hope you guys check it out if you can. And then lastly, I think this is when a lot of you guys can be very familiar with it. It's the 4th season of My Hero Academia. And I've technically not seen the last episode by the time this is recording because there's still one more episode in the season. Just to get this out in time before the new year, I'm watching the second to last episode. Again, spoilers. If you've not seen it, we have the confrontation between Lemillion and Chisaki overhaul. A lot of people have been having kind of problems with this season. They're saying it's too slow, and I definitely see that there's a tone shift in that we're getting less of the school and slice of life vibe. It's been heavy in the other direction. We've seen a lot of like hero cooperation in past episodes, especially in the Bakugo retrieval arc, and a lot of like planning with the police. But this is like the heaviest it's ever been, which is why I think people are kind of not enjoying it as much, or at least that's the vibe that I've heard on Twitter sometimes. This last episode, we get to see Lemillion really go all out against Chisaki overhaul and in trying to rescue Eri. And he does, but it looks like, again, spoilers, it's crazy to see that he's lost his power because of the new bullet that they came up with that disactivates your power. And I might have to watch it again. I've watched it several times, but I'm still not sure if they're for sure this is a bullet that will permanently get rid of your power or if it's just disabling longer than any of the other bullets before. But from what I'm gathering, this might be like it for him. I think this is like, this makes you quirkless, like for good. And so it obviously makes the episode very heavy because we see just how pure and how well intentioned Lemillion is. It's really sad to see how much he's putting himself on the line for Eri, and it's really inspiring, which it just, that's where the strength in the show is, in the really inspiring. Like, it's not just that the fights are well executed, it's just that there's a lot of emotion in the fights too, which I think this definitely was like a very emotive one. For me personally, this is going to be one of the battles that I remember the most from this series altogether. Left on a cliffhanger, Lemillion has lost his power. He's trying to save Eri with everything he can, and he's actually being punctured even by the spikes that Chisaki is making with his quirk, which is basically alchemy. If you've ever watched Fullmetal Alchemist, decompose something and then recreate it again. And he's using that to create a lot of spikes around. And yeah, he looks like he's basically killed Lemillion. At the very end, you think it's a cliffhanger, but there's a post-credit where Midoriya comes out, and so that's where I think we'll end the series next week. Midoriya coming in to battle Overhaul, and I don't know what this means for Lemillion. I'm assuming he's gonna make it. He's not gonna die, but I am curious to see the fallout or the aftermath of seeing one of like the number one prospective heroes. I think Aizawa said that he's like the next in line to be number one. Not obviously not the next one to inherit One for All, but the next like likely to be a number one hero. And to see now that he doesn't have a quirk anymore, I'm really curious to see where the show goes with that. So that's the recap for Food Wars, Ascendance of a Bookworm, and My Hero Academia Season 4. And that's kind of how every episode will start, with kind of just a brief recap of 3 shows. The next segment after recaps is going to be news, which kind of coincidentally has to do with My Hero Academia right now. I'm doing a little bit of community news right now. There is some disagreement going on in the My Hero fandom about that last fight between Lemillion and Overhaul, which is a little unfortunate because we already have a lot of discourse going online with the Rise of Skywalker and all the back and forth in the fandom, and now it's making its way into anime too, I guess. So for those who don't read the manga, I don't read the manga, there is a moment right before it's revealed that Togata, that Lemillion, has been like impaled by like a spike. There's a moment right before that in the manga that is just a black bar across the screen, and it's meant for dramatic effect to kind of imply kind of a jump in time. It's kind of a beat in the story, just to really punctuate a dramatic pause, a dramatic time jump. I don't know if this is described in the text of the manga or something, but apparently that black bar it's meant to symbolize the passage of I think 15 minutes. It's to symbolize that he's been fighting Overhaul with no powers for 15 minutes. And so it's for a dramatic, pregnant pause kind of in manga form. And in the anime, what they did was that they added some still shots. You get some, I think it's like, I don't want to just throw a number out there, but you get a number of just still shots instead of animation where that black bar would have been. And that is what the fandom is kind of in disagreement about right now, is that some people are saying, no, you should have just honored the manga, just put a black bar, let it stand on its own. Or the argument is that if you're going to put in extra moments, if you're going to add to that scene, then why would you put just still images? Why wouldn't you just animate it? And I think they wanted to compromise. I'm honestly all aboard the decision they did to insert something to show. Because, like I said, even as I'm talking right now, I'm not exactly sure what's going on with now that Lemillion's been hit with one of these special bullets. But in the anime, as you see the passage of time, you see slowly, little by little, he's bleeding, he's getting cut, and he can't dodge. And so it kind of, for anyone that was doubtful of whether or not the bullet was taking effects, this, besides the fact that he's not using his power, this also just helps punch it home that he's doing the best he can, but he's still getting hurt. It kind of adds more buildup, I believe anyways, to that final shot where you do see he's at the end of his rope, he's been punctured, he's, gone all out. He's done his Plus Ultra already. And so I really enjoy that. I do admit that it would be cool if they had animated it instead of just the screenshots, but I'm also happy with just having the still images. And I was kind of making a comparison. I was trying to think of like, I get why they did this. It adds extra dramatic effect. I know that in the manga having a black bar and having that in the anime too might have worked, but a comparison I was making is that for those of you who watch Star Wars, in The Last Jedi, there's the moment where Holdo, blasts through the fleet using light speed. And one of the best shots, one of everybody's favorite shots, is that just quiet moment where you see all the Star Destroyers get destroyed. And to do what people were saying to do would be like, hey, instead of showing that moment, that anticipation, that really dramatic beat, instead just like have her hit light speed and then just the screen go to black for dramatic effect, and then seeing just, maybe cut to the inside of Star Destroyers when they're getting blown up or something like that. That's kind of like what I think. That's kind of the comparison I make. Yeah, that would be a dramatic effect if we had just cut to black after she hits, and we just are left to our imaginations of how that looked or what went on. That could be really effective, but I also really enjoy what they did, how they executed the visual of her going through the fleet like that and how they left it silent. Like, I think that had a really great effect. Another comparison I want to make was in Avengers. When they do the time jump, they make a very slow, they fit in the title 5 years later, and it really adds a lot of weight to the time jump. And yeah, you could have just done it without the text if you wanted. You could have just had it go, fade to black and just stay there for like a long time. Really let the audience sit there and sit with the consequences before you jump into the next scene, and that would have been effective too. But I think in its own way, having the text of 5 years later adds its own bit of drama as well. So where do I fall in this? I like that they inserted that. I do see people's perspective of wanting to stick close to the manga, but I'm totally cool with it. And curious to hear if any of y'all noticed or what y'all thought of it too. And that's a little bit of news segment of the podcast. That one was a bit of a community news. In the future, I'll be spotlighting more like release date for maybe any upcoming announcements of anime movies or anything like that, or just maybe adaptations that are coming on board that I want to explore talking about. And so yeah, this is just kind of the news segment, and I hope you guys, I want to be more informed about the anime industry, and I'd like to share any interesting articles and news tidbits out there with you guys as well. And then from here, we're going to go into the meat and potatoes of the show, which is the topic of the week. And as I'm sure many of y'all are aware, everybody's putting lists together, wrapping things up, of course, now that the winter anime season is over, and we're also wrapping up the year of anime in 2019. So for this topic of the week, I'll be hitting my top 5 winter anime of the season, and then my top 10 anime of 2019 altogether. I do have a list of my top 10 of the decade, but I want that to be for the next episode. Because again, this is a pilot. I'd like to get y'all just kind of familiar with the format, and I'd like to start taking comments. And so that's why I'm kind of splitting it up. This week is kind of just about me, but next week, although I do have my top 10 of the decade, I also want to include comments that I will read on the podcast from you guys and some of y'all's favorite, whether it's of the year, of the decade, of the season even. Just, I want to read off and hear from you guys what some of y'all's favorite anime were. So I'm splitting the list in half. So to jump kind of straight into things, let's just talk about the season. We're finishing up the winter anime season of 2019. And I'm going to go from number 1 to number 5. These are 5 anime that I really enjoyed this season. I mean, of course, we already covered My Hero Academia Season 4. I'm really enjoying the new tone, the different change in kind of the atmosphere that My Hero's gone. And I think it's transitioning. Like, we're really moving into, the world is growing in that we're starting to see more and more villains outside of the League of Villains, in that we have Yakuza making its way into the story now, which adds a different level of groundedness to the show because of just the fact that Yakuza is based off a real life kind of entity. It's based a bit more, off of an actual cultural part of Japan, and to see that make its way into My Hero was interesting. And yeah, it does slow things a bit more down because you do have more planning and involvement with police officers and law enforcement, things like that, outside of just the extra outside of just the anime-ness of the hero tournaments and things like that, and the licensing exam. And so it's different. I totally recognize that it's different, and that I can see why some people might not like it. But so far, I'm really liking it. I've already covered season 4 of Food Wars, which was, again, this is where I think I jump off the train. I want to go out on a high note. I really, really enjoyed this season. Again, I always have my misgivings about how much fan service this show has, but that aside, the fan service aside, it was really cool to get a lot of closure with a lot of the rivals that we had. It seems that we're transitioning. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a time skip or something when the new season starts. It is less about the trivial battling back and forth just for the heck of it, now that we actually had something worth fighting for, which was the soul of the school, really. The next one that I really enjoyed is an anime called We Never Learn, and this is the second season. To give a brief recap of, it's about a high school student, and he really wants to enter a particular high prestige college, but he comes from a low income family, and so he relies purely on his grades. And so he's like one of the number one students, at his high school. And the school kind of wants to take advantage of that. They're like, hey, we see you really want to get into this school. You have really good grades, but you need a recommendation. And we're happy to provide that for you if you help guide some of our struggling students who are geniuses in their own right, but all have interest in continuing education in fields that are not their strengths. For example, you have an athlete who is struggling with their English language. And we have the mathematics genius who wants to go into social sciences. And then we have the social science genius who wants to go into mathematics and sciences. And so it's really wholesome. It's a lot of fun. It's really funny. It has it's just a little bit sprinkling of romantic comediness to it. But more than anything, it really is just about like the power of friendship, which is anime as fuck. And I'm always here for it. And yeah, of course, there's like little crushes here and there, but it leans so far away from that. It really is more about students trying to be there for one another, because I think anyone can relate to that. If you have something you're really good at, but that's not what you want to go into, you have, your heart is set on something else, and maybe people are saying, why do you want to do that when you're such a genius at this? And just like being like, I appreciate that, but means a lot to me, and I want to pursue that. And just, I think we can all relate to that, and it's really encouraging to see, this group of friends come together who, all end up supporting one another, because they know that they're the only ones that have each other's back. And so it's been really fun to watch, and it's mostly wholesome. Yes, I admit there's like a few fan servicey kind of moments, but more often than not, it really is just about like these students having each other's backs, and I'm here for it, and it's pretty cool. The next one is a long title. This is again one of those isekai shows. It's called Didn't I Say to Make My Abilities Average in the Next Life? Now, to give it more context to this, when you have an isekai show, one of the biggest drawbacks, or for the community, is one of the biggest eye-rolling things, is that whenever a character is reborn into another life, one of the tropes that is frustrating a lot of people, including myself, is that usually that hero or that character is given extra abilities. They usually have something from their previous life that helps them. To give an example, one of the shows I really like that's an isekai is called Konosuba, and the character is plucked and dropped into an RPG world, but he was a big gamer back in his previous life, so he understands the gaming tropes of like dungeon raiding and monsters and spells to cast and things like that. And so, but the angle for this one is that it's almost even, it breaks the fourth wall. It's like, I think the character knows that isekai is kind of a thing, and it's like, oh no, like I don't want that kind of life. Though, like you're usually given one request also as part of the deal when you're reborn. And so the request from our main character here is, hey, in the next life, don't give me those crazy powers that you're always giving everybody. I want a normal life because I had such a fantastic life before and I was not happy with it. So I want a normal life, as normal as possible. So she says, make me as average as possible in this new world. And that is it's kind of a monkey's paw kind of thing. I kind of wish where if you take the average, though, of a commoner, and then the highest power in this world is like this elder dragon, super bombastic, apocalyptic beast, then the average ends up being still someone that is like Superman level. it's like Goku level. It's like it's still way above everyone else, and so it's still funny to see them wanting to have a normal life, but through circumstances they do keep having to use their abilities, and frustrated that they cannot have the normal life that they want, and they end up drawing more attention to themselves in this new world than they hope to. And so I really enjoyed it. It's mostly pretty wholesome, no fan service or anything like that. It's the main character finds like a group of fellow heroes to form a party with, and it's just cool just to kind of watch something, just kind of slice of life, and it's slapstick, it's funny. I really enjoy it. And then the last one of the season that I really liked was Ascendance of a Bookworm, which again I talked about during my recap. I just really enjoyed the wholesomeness of it, and it's cool. It kind of gave me like Magic School Bus vibes in that, or Carmen Sandiego in that it's not edutainment, but there's like sprinkles of that. To move on from here, I'm going to go into the top 10 anime of this year overall, 2019. So not just the winter season, but overall. And of course, you'll be seeing some familiar titles listed on here too. And starting at number 1, My Hero Academia Season 4, which I won't go too far into because we've already talked a lot about that. And my number 2 is Kaguya-sama Love is War. And those who aren't familiar with that, it's a high school romantic comedy, and I just think it's so much fun. So the quick premise of that is that you have the student council, president and vice president, and they're kind of like, it's really played up in this anime just how important and regal and high society, quote unquote, the student council is compared to the rest of the school, and how everybody holds them up on a pedestal and is always admiring the student council president, vice president. Everybody's always shipping them together, like, oh, they would make such a great couple. And I think this goes to their heads, and so they both try to get the other one, but they both are so prideful. It's very Pride and Prejudice kind of. And they both want the other to be the one to make the first move. They have so much pride that they're like, no, even though, yes, it makes a good idea that, and what starts is just like, oh, that would be kind of an interesting idea. It turns into genuine affection. They really do want to be with one another, and they do want to confess to one another, but their pride causes them to not want to be the one to confess. And so it's a lot of just really funny stories about them trying to trick the other into wanting to make the first move. To kind of give an example, one vice president will kind of come into the student council room and be like, oh, I happen to have an extra ticket to the movie. I hope I find someone that might be interested in that. And they purposely get a movie ticket that they'd be interested in. And it's a war. The subtitle is Love is War, and the president being aware, like, no, you're just trying to get me to say I want to go. What can I do then to counter this? And it's a really funny. It's mostly wholesome, and it's a lot of fun. My number 3 pick for the year is Mob Psycho 100. See, we had the second season, and I already enjoyed the first season of Mob Psycho 100, but the season 2 just took it to a new level. I found it surprisingly moving, to say the least. Spend more time understanding the relationship between Mob and Regan, and their relationship. You don't get a lot of relationship development in a comedy like this, and so I was really surprised to see just how much this season focused on both of them growing up individually, as well as growing up as well as growing as friends, as mentor and student, so to speak. The action got brought up, and what this show does so well, which I give credit to, just like My Hero, is that when the action goes up, they also do a really good job of incorporating a lot of emotion, that these fights don't mean something on the outside. They mean just as much as going on internally for these characters as is what's going on the outside, which is why it makes it to my list, number 3 on my anime of 2019. Food Wars Season 4 for my number 4. Again, we've talked plenty about that and how I was surprised at how much I really enjoyed, what an epic, ending and conclusion this ended up having. Number 5, we had already talked about, is We Never Learn. Again, that was the one about the tutor and his new friends, who are all geniuses in their own right, except for the areas where they want to exceed, and, their struggles to overcome their obstacles and their expectations set on them by, not only their families, but their school itself. Number 6, again, I talked about that one already, is Didn't I Say to Make My Abilities Average in the Next Life? It's I just gotta touch on that title. It's funny, it's hard to read straight, and it's hard to imagine they made that the title, and it's kind of like a trope. If you ever look up isekai anime, they always have really weird, convoluted names. I think last year there was one I really enjoyed. Actually, I think it came out maybe regardless of when it came out. Another one that had a similar title was That One Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime. It's just like it just the title ends up being just the description, like almost like the log line for what the show is gonna be. And we've already talked about that one and how I really enjoyed it. It's just some good, wholesome power of friendship with some comedy and a little bit slapsticky and making fun of the overall genre of isekai shows. I really like it. I hope you guys give it a shot. The next one, I believe that we're looking at number 7, is Senryu Girl, which is a short anime series that a slice of life. That's one of my favorite genres, is just slice of life. For those who don't know me, I'm an aspiring screenwriter and filmmaker, and I love slice of life content. That's why Wong Fu Productions is one of my favorite filmmakers out there, because it's just short stories that just tell really simple character moments, and that's what this show is all about, and why I really enjoy it. It's about this girl who it's a poetry club, I believe, and they communicate through poetry. And this girl, her quirk is that she only speaks in haiku. And the way I believe that works, it's 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables, and that's I think I'm getting the premise on that right. I don't know if Senryu is different from a haiku, but what I believe is, but regardless, to say is that she only speaks through poetry, and it's just that's kind of the quirk that makes this a little bit different from other high school anime. But at the same time, I like that at the end of the day, it is just another really nice, wholesome kind of light romance high school comedy. When you have all this action-packed shows, it's cool to kind of wind down with something like this. It's just like, it's nice and wholesome. It's just about characters in school growing and expressing each other through poetry. And so it's nice, light, easy. Next one, number 8, Ascendance of Bookworm, which we've talked plenty about. Mine and her journey to finally get hands on books, because books are awesome, right? Next one is The Promised Neverland, which made its way, like, it just like exploded. I think everybody's really been enjoying that show. For those who aren't aware, it is about an orphanage and how things are not as they seem. And if you are not heard of Promised Neverland yet, I'm very surprised, and I would highly recommend it. Even though we're talking like pure spoilers, like on a lot of the shows so far, that's one I'm going to be very vague about, all in case you for some reason have been putting it off or didn't think it was your thing. As far as genres go, it's kind of light supernatural, light thriller, but it is very cat and mouse. There's definitely an element of trying to the great escape kind of thing, and it's very unexpected and full of surprises, and I hope you guys will check it out. But again, that is The Promised Neverland. And then lastly for 2019 was an Amazon show called Made in Abyss, which is a kind of dystopian supernatural show. It's about this village surrounded by a large crater. It's a large hole in the ground, the size of a city, I guess, and the city is built along the edge of this hole, and this society excavates it for lost technology and ancient civilization artifacts, and they're specialized adventurers. And our main character, again, I'm really bad at keeping on track with character names, but the main character wants to explore the caverns themselves, and their mother went into this and was a highly regarded excavator who never came back, and they go on a journey after making some new partners and making new friends along the way. It's very dramatic. If you just look at the art style, it looks very fluffy, it looks very lighthearted, it looks like it's going to be just a nice kid show, but it's very, very dramatic, very dark, very heavy, and but also very heavy fantasy, which I really enjoy a lot. When I say fantasy, I mean kind of like supernatural kind of fantasy, what you'd expect to see in something like a Ghibli movie, something that, it embraces a lot of imagery of lost technology, but magical creatures and wondrous environments, and just a pleasure to watch. It's like watching if Ghibli had gotten in partner with a storytelling that is a lot more dark. It's kind of a mesh of that. It's very much a pleasure to watch this year. So that makes its way on my last slot on my top 10 anime of 2019. I'm curious if any of y'all watched any of those. I'd love to hear back to you, either in the Twitter comments on if any of those made its way onto your list too, or if any of that sounds like something you might be willing to check out in the future. After the topic of the week, I'd like to cut to a culture corner, which is where I take just something that I saw in an anime and do a little bit of not a deep dive, but a light dive. Just to kind of jump straight into the culture corner. I talked already several times about the anime Ascendance of a Bookworm, and so for the culture corner, I wanted to look up what was one of the first books in Japan, and that honor apparently goes to Tale of Genji, and it's considered one of the first full-length novels to come out of Japan, and it was written in the 11th century, which I'm not really sure what that means, but I did a quick Google, and it means from the year 1001 through 1100. I think that is the 11th century. So the Tale of Genji, it was written by a noble woman. The author's name was Murasaki Shikibu. Apologies if I pronounced any of that wrong. The Tale of Genji is about an aristocrat, this handsome aristocrat named Hikaru Genji, and it's about kind of his life as a noble person and the romances that he experienced. And so it kind of reminds me of like what we'd see in a Game of Thrones. It's funny how we enjoyed this just as much as I guess they did back then. And so it was, this is apparently Tale of Genji being the first full-length novel out of Japan. And so that's kind of like the purpose of the Culture Corner, is to take just a little aspect out of an anime that we've covered so far, like Ascendance of a Bookworm, and just see what can we learn about actual Japan or actual Japanese culture based on a topic inspired by anime itself. So Ascendance of a Bookworm led me to look up what is the first full-length novel, and again, thanks to a quick Google, that is Tale of Genji. And so I hope you guys kind of dig that kind of segment. It won't be too long, just kind of a little fun fact that I like learning about, because don't get me wrong, like I love learning about Japanese industry and anime and the pop culture of Japan, but it's also good to remember that a lot of the plots or a lot of inspirations that influence anime come from actual, culture outside of that too. And so that's my purpose for that. And I hope you guys enjoy it. Again, I won't stay too much on it and that's kind of it for that segment. I would love to end each episode, by the way, with a Q&A, just generic anime questions, kind of lightning round things. If y'all have ever wanted to know maybe what's the first anime I ever liked, what kind of anime I don't like, maybe if you want to know my favorite character from a particular show, this is where just kind of lightning round questions would come out. Just explore that a bit and answer what I can. And actually with that, we've reached the end of our pilot episode. Let's give everybody a round of applause for sticking through to the end. Hope you guys enjoy this formatting. It is kind of a mix of everything I would hope to talk about with people, not only the Culture Corner, but the anime topic of the week. I'm glad to explore a bit of news, whether it's community news or industry news, and it's always fun to recap shows. And so thank you guys for listening. I hope you'll comment any of your feedback below in Twitter. I'm letting you know now that I will be setting up a Google Doc. That way people who want to get involved, who want to be on the show, can fill it out and we can coordinate when to record on a topic. And that can be whatever kind of anime topic you want. Some examples that I really want to maybe explore are maybe favorite anime movies, maybe talking about genres, maybe talking about tropes that people like or don't like. I'd also really like to incorporate comments into that too. So once a topic is announced, for example, if I was to say, next week we're going to talk about our favorite Ghibli movies, then I would love not only to talk with that guest about that, but I'd love to also include comments from you guys, some of y'all's favorite Ghibli movies. And again, that's just kind of an example. I'm not saying that the next one will be that, but that's something you can maybe imagine in a future episode being. So news on that at ThatAnimePod on Twitter. You can also find more from me personally on Twitter at PixelBrave. Don't forget to follow That Nerdy Site as well, where you can see the upcoming Disney Plus show, our video game game ranking show. That wouldn't be film class with Ben Bellevue. Check out all the content there. We got plenty of lists coming out to tie up the end of the year, our top 10 films, games from different staff members, and just a lot of fun stuff there. So please support That Nerdy Site. You can also find us on Patreon, where your contributions are what made shows like this happen to begin with. This was one of the first tiers, and thank you all so much for making this happen. This is something I've been wanting to happen for a long time, and it's really all thanks to y'all that y'all are giving me this platform. So thanks again. And thank you, Grimecraft, for allowing me to use your song, Lonely Rolling Star, the remix that was made in cooperation with Game Chops. Thank you so much for this track. I hope you guys think it's a bop. I absolutely love it, and I think it goes perfectly with the episode. Thank you guys so much. Please give Grimecraft my love, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.